My name is Nora Callahan. I am 31 years old. Right now, I am sitting in a parking lot outside of Walgreens on the corner of Belmore Avenue and Route 9 in Freeport, New York. And I have a small cedar box on the passenger seat next to me. It's about the size of a hardback novel. It smells like cedar and old paper and something faintly floral that I have never been able to name. That box was handed to me 11 months ago at my grandmother's 83rd birthday party, handed to me by my mother, who had a smile on her face that did not reach her eyes, handed to me in front of 14 people who all went quiet at the same moment. The box was empty, or so I thought, because when I finally opened the false bottom, something I did not discover for 6 weeks, alone in my apartment at 2 in the morning, there was a note inside, written in my grandmother's handwriting, 4 sentences, and not one of those 4 sentences was about the box. Every single one of them was about me. Before I tell you what that note said, let me take you back to where this story actually starts, before I get into what happened that night, what was in that note, and what I did with it. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story actually means something to you. Drop your city and 2 words in the comments, 2 words that describe the family dinner that changed you. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Let me take you back to summer 2009. Heron Falls, New York, population 4,200. The kind of place where the high school football coach also teaches driver's ed and nobody thinks that's strange. It was the 4th of July weekend, and my grandmother, Eleanor Voss, she went by Ellie, and only people who didn't know her called her Eleanor, was hosting a dinner at her house on Marsh Creek Road. The house had a screened porch that smelled like citronella and fried onions, and the dining room table had a crack running down the center of it that she'd covered with a runner she'd made herself. She covered a lot of things herself. That was the Ellie way. I was 15. I set the table. I filled the water glasses. I carried the bread basket out twice because my Uncle Robert Callahan ate half of it before anyone sat down, and nobody said a word to him about it. That was how things worked in our family. The unspoken rule was that you made yourself useful and invisible in equal measure. You served. You smiled. You did not require anything. My mother, Patricia Callahan, Nevos, sat at the far end of the table and ran the evening the way she ran everything, through attention. She gave it selectively and withdrew it like a tide. That night she was bright and laughing and touching my father's arm and telling a story about a neighbor's fence that had nothing to do with anything, and the whole table leaned toward her like sunflowers. My father, Dennis Callahan, was not an unkind man. He was an absent man. There is a difference, but sometimes the effect is the same. He laughed when Patricia laughed. He looked where she looked. He had been doing this for so long it had become his personality. Halfway through dinner I asked a question. This is the inciting incident. A question so unremarkable that I still cannot believe what followed. I asked my grandmother, who was sitting next to me and whose hand I could feel near mine on the tablecloth, whether she had thought about what she wanted to do with her house. She was 78 that summer. It was not a strange question. It was not a rude question. I had read an article in a magazine at the dentist's office about estate planning, and I had been worried about her. That was the whole of it. Silence dropped over that table like a curtain. My grandmother looked at me with an expression I would not understand for another 16 years. Something between recognition and sorrow. She opened her mouth. My mother spoke first. Nora, that was all she said. Just my name. But the way she said it, the small, careful way, the way you'd say careful to someone holding something breakable, told the whole table everything they needed to know. I looked around. My Uncle Robert was staring at his plate. My Aunt Connie Marsh was refilling her wine glass even though it wasn't empty. My cousin Jake Marsh, who was 17, was looking at the screened window like something important was happening outside. 14 people in that room. Not one of them spoke. My grandmother's hand found mine under the tablecloth and squeezed once. Then she said brightly to no one in particular, "Who wants more chicken?" The evening continued. I cleared the dishes. I dried and stacked. And I told myself that what I felt, the specific ache of being managed, was something I had misread. That was what 15 years of practice had taught me to do with my own perception. Over the next decade, the pattern repeated. Not always dramatically. That is the thing about this kind of family dynamic that is hardest to explain from the outside. It wasn't loud. It wasn't constant. It moved in cycles like weather. Patricia Callahan was not a screaming mother. She was a tilting her head mother. That's an interesting choice mother. You know I only say this because I love you mother. She performed her love for audiences, at family events, at church, at school conferences. She was warm and concerned and occasionally dabbed at the corner of her eye when she talked about how hard she worked to support me. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. She believed every word of it. That is the part I took the longest to accept. When I got into the journalism program at SUNY Purchase at 18, she told her book club I had gotten a scholarship to Columbia. When I asked her why, she tilted her head and said, "I just didn't want them to think we couldn't afford something better." She wasn't talking about herself. She was talking about me. When I was 22 and started dating a woman named Cara Solis, my mother did not yell. She asked questions in her soft, calibrated way at every family event in front of people until the questions themselves became a kind of pressure. "Is this really the life you want?" Spoken sweetly, with a hand on my shoulder, is not a question. It is an instruction. The year I was 25, I got a job offer in Portland, Oregon, a staff writer position at a regional magazine called the West Side Current, starting salary $41,000. I had been freelancing and bartending and splitting a one-bedroom with a roommate in Queens, and this felt like ground under my feet for the first time. I told my mother at Sunday dinner. She looked at her plate, then she looked up and smiled, and she said very quietly, "Well, I hope you know what you're doing." I packed one suitcase and a duffel bag. I had $340 in my checking account and no credit card. I bought a one-way bus ticket to Portland for $187 on Greyhound. The bus left Port Authority at 9:15 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. I sat in the second row and watched the Lincoln Tunnel swallow us whole. I did not call anyone when I arrived. That was my quiet and irreversible act. I did not slam the door. I simply walked through it and kept going. Portland cost more than I had expected. Most things do. For the first 3 months, I rented a room in a shared house on C. Hawthorne Boulevard for $640 a month. The room had a window that faced a brick wall and a closet with no rod, so I kept my clothes in the duffel bag. I ate a lot of rice and frozen vegetables and eggs. I calculated my grocery budget to $47 a week, and I did not go over it. The job was real. I want to say that clearly. Because sometimes when people hear this kind of story, they assume the protagonist was naive or deluded. The job was real, and I was good at it. My editor, a woman named Dana Fitch, had been in regional journalism for 22 years, and she had the energy of someone who had outlasted every trend that was supposed to kill her profession. She was not warm exactly. She was precise. She noticed things. On my third week, she stopped by my desk and said, "Your copy is clean." That was the whole compliment. I have not forgotten it. What I did not have, an emergency contact I trusted, a family member to call when I got food poisoning in October and spent 27 hours on the bathroom floor, a birthday call, Thanksgivings, the particular loneliness of knowing that somewhere a version of your life is being narrated by someone who was not present for most of it. That last one is the invisible cost nobody warns you about. Going no contact doesn't just remove the bat, it removes the record. My mother was telling a story about me to her book club, her church group, her neighbors on Marsh Creek Road, and I could not correct it. I was becoming a cautionary tale in a story I hadn't written, told in rooms I would never enter. Pause. But here is what silence gave me, 14 months after I left. On a Wednesday morning in May, I woke up at 6:47 a.m. to my phone alarm. I lay there for a moment in the thin light coming through the brick wall window, and I realized, just notice quietly, the way you notice a sound has stopped, that I had not woken up mid-sleep the night before. I had not run a mental rehearsal of a conversation that would never go the way I planned it. I had not spent the first 4 minutes of consciousness managing someone else's possible reaction to my existing. That was the morning, that was the moment, not triumphant, just quiet. Like a hum that had been running for so long you'd stopped hearing it, and then it stopped. I lay there for 3 more minutes. Then I got up and made coffee and went to work. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to get a lot more complicated. And the cedar box isn't done yet. There was no montage, just alarm clocks and spreadsheets and falling asleep with a notebook open on my chest. Year 1 in Portland, staff writer, $41,000, learning the city the way you learn a language, slowly, embarrassingly, then suddenly. I covered city council meetings and school board elections and a 6-month investigation into a water district that turned into the most read piece the magazine had published in 4 years. Dana Fitch sent me a one-line email afterward. "This is what the job is." I printed it out and kept it in my desk drawer. Year 2, I asked for a raise and got $6,000 more and an expanded beat. I opened a savings account and put $200 in it every month without fail, even the month my car had $1,100 in brake work. Year 3, I met a friend. Her name was Simone Okafor, and she was a copy editor at the West Side Current who had moved to Portland from Lagos via London, via a year in a cousin's apartment in Tacoma. She had her own version of exile. We did not talk about it directly for the first 4 months of knowing each other. We talked about work. We complained about the coffee machine on the 3rd floor. We had dinner twice, and both times ended up talking until the restaurant closed. The third time we had dinner, she said something and then went quiet and looked at her glass. I said something back and went quiet and looked at the table. And in that shared silence, we understood each other completely. That was the bonding moment. No triumph, just recognition. Dana Fitch became, without ever announcing herself as such, the person who treated my hunger as an asset. When I mentioned that I had grown up watching everything closely because I had to, she didn't ask why. She said, "That's your edge. Use it." I did. I noticed things other reporters missed. I read the footnotes in public documents. I verified quotes twice, sometimes 3 times. I checked everything twice. It's how I grew up. In year 4, I was promoted to senior writer. In year 5, I started a newsletter on the side that grew to 14,000 subscribers in 18 months. In year 6, I was offered a features director position at a digital publication in New York called the Outer Borough Review, salary $94,000. I took it. I moved back to New York in August of that year into a 1-bedroom apartment in Ridgewood, Queens. Snow fell the first night I was there, which was unusual for August, and then I realized I was remembering it wrong. It was February. My memory had compressed 6 years into something that felt shorter than it was. I will tell you about the object I had carried. From the day I left Heron Falls, I had a small white envelope in the outside pocket of whatever bag I carried. The envelope had my grandmother Ellie's handwriting on the front, just my name, Nora, in her slanted cursive. She had pressed it into my hand the morning I left for college at 18, a year before things became what they became, and she had said, "Not yet." 2 words. I had taken that to mean I would know when. I did not open it for 13 years. I opened it on a Tuesday night in my Ridgewood apartment, sitting on the kitchen floor with a glass of wine I hadn't finished, at 2:14 a.m., because I couldn't sleep and because something, I have no better word for it, told me it was time. The envelope contained a single index card on it in Ellie's handwriting. The ones who are told they are too much are usually exactly enough. The ones who leave are usually the ones who were brave enough to stay true. "I see you, Nora Jean. I always have. Wait for the cedar box." I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. The wine went warm. The refrigerator hummed. I had not cried in front of anyone in 6 years. I cried alone on that floor for approximately 40 minutes. Then I washed my face and went to bed. She had written that card 13 years ago. She had already known. She had been waiting for the right moment to tell me, and she had designed the telling herself in her own time, on her own terms. That was Ellie. My grandmother turned 83 in September of last year. The party was at her house on Marsh Creek Road. I had not been back to that house in 6 years. I had not spoken to my mother in 4. I had exchanged 4 emails with my father, each one composed carefully from a distance. I had spoken to my grandmother by phone every 2 to 3 weeks for the entirety of my exile. Brief calls, warm and light, never touching the center of things. She never asked me to come back. She never asked me to explain. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. She had asked me to come to the party, not through my mother, directly by phone 3 weeks before. She said, "I need you there, Nora. Don't let them be the reason you're not." So I went. What I did not know was that 6 months earlier, the Outer Borough Review had published a profile of me, a full-page profile in their annual People Shaping New York feature. My picture, my name, my history, the broad strokes of it, the ones I had chosen to share publicly. It had been picked up by a couple of regional websites. It was not a large story. It was large enough. Someone, I still don't know who, but I have my suspicions about my cousin Jake, who had followed me quietly on social media for 2 years, sent the link to my mother. Her first reaction was not pride. I know this because Aunt Connie told Simone, who told me months later. Her first reaction was to call Connie and say, "Did you know about this?" That was the first response. Not, "Look what she's done." Not, "I'm so glad she's okay." The first response was to determine who in her orbit had information she didn't have. The voicemail started coming to my cell phone, a number she must have gotten from my father, beginning the Thursday before the party. 5 and 6 days. I did not answer. I listened to all of them. The first was my mother. Warm, a little breathless. "Nora, it's Mom. I've been seeing some things. I'd love to talk. Call me back." The second was my father. Shorter. "It's Dad. Your mom would really like to hear from you. I would too. Think about it." The third was Aunt Connie. Her voice was different, lower, less rehearsed. "Nora, this is Connie. I'm not sure what I'm doing calling. I hope you're well. You look well, in the photo." The fourth was my mother again. Less warm. Nora, I think we should talk before the party. There are some things I think you've misunderstood. I'd really like the chance to explain. The fifth was a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be my cousin Jake. He said, "Hey, it's Jake. I just wanted to say, the article was cool, that's all." Then he hung up. Not one of those 5 voicemails contained the word sorry. That contrast is the entire point. I listened to all 5. Then I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and started packing for the party. I drove up to Heron Falls on a Saturday morning. The drive was 2 hours and 14 minutes. I stopped once for coffee at a rest stop outside Suffern and sat in the parking lot for 6 minutes before I pulled back onto the highway. Not from fear. I want to be accurate about this. It was closer to calibration. The party started at noon. I arrived at 12:47. I know this because I checked my phone when I turned onto Marsh Creek Road and made a note of the time. Old habit. I verify things. There were 11 cars in the driveway and along the curb. I parked at the end. I sat for a moment. The house looked the same. The screened porch had a new cushion on the bench. The garden along the front walk was fuller than I remembered. I went in through the side gate, the way I always used to. I knew my grandmother would be in the kitchen, because she was always in the kitchen during parties, moving slowly between the counter and the stove, supervising by proximity. I went straight there. She was standing at the sink, rinsing a serving spoon. She heard me come in and turned around. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You're taller." I wasn't taller. That was her way of saying, "I see that you are not the same person you were." I hugged her, and she held on for longer than she usually did, and I did not move until she let go. Then I went into the dining room. My mother was standing near the sideboard, talking to a woman from her church group. I watched her face from across the room as she saw me. I'll try to describe it accurately. First, a split second of something unguarded. Shock. And underneath the shock, calculation. Not joy. The joy came a half second later, and it was performed, assembled rapidly, like a stage set going up. She smiled. She touched her hair. She looked around the room to see who was watching. She crossed toward me, and I did not move. "Nora." She opened her arms. I said, "Hi, Patricia." I did not say Mom. I had decided this in the car outside Suffern. Not as punishment, as accuracy. Something shifted in her face, just briefly. Then the smile came back, wider. The next 40 minutes I spent with my grandmother, with Jake, who turned out to have grown into someone quieter and more self-aware than I had expected, and with Aunt Connie, who hugged me awkwardly and held my arm too long and said, "You look like you've built something," in a way that told me she meant it. Then came the gifts. Ellie sat in her chair at the head of the dining room table and opened her presents one by one, with the deliberateness of someone who intends to remember every moment. When she got to the box from my parents, a tasteful arrangement of things in a wicker basket, she thanked them warmly. When she got to mine, I had brought a framed photograph of the two of us from a trip we'd taken to Block Island when I was 9, which I had found in a box in my apartment and had reprinted and put in a $10 frame from Target. She held it for a long time. She didn't say anything, she just looked at it. Then she looked at me. Then she reached under her chair and produced the small cedar box. "I have something for you," she said. She said this in front of the whole room. She held the box out to me. I took it. I thanked her. I held it in both hands. My mother, from across the table, said pleasantly, "What is it?" Ellie said, "Something that belongs to Nora." She did not look at Patricia when she said it. She kept her eyes on me. I put the box in my bag. I stayed for another hour and a half. I helped clear the table. I said goodbye to my grandmother last, in the kitchen, and she held my face in both of her hands and said nothing. My mother caught me on the front walk. My father was a step behind her, which was where he always was. She said, "We should talk." I said, "I agree. I'll send you an email this week." She said, "I feel like there's been a misunderstanding that we've never had the chance to clear up." I said, "I understand things clearly, Patricia." My father said in his careful, absent way, "We miss you, Nora." I said, "I know, Dad." Then I walked to my car. I did not hurry. I did not look back. I drove off Marsh Creek Road at 3:11 p.m., and I did not cry until I was back on the highway past Suffern, and then only for about 8 minutes. Then I put on a podcast and drove the rest of the way home. That night I sent an email. It took me 45 minutes to write. It was 4 paragraphs. It said, "I am not interested in relitigating the past. I am open to a relationship defined by honesty and mutual respect. What I will not do is participate in a version of this family that requires me to be smaller or quieter or less than what I am. The door is not closed, but it will not be opened by pressure or by urgency or by an audience. When you are ready to talk, plainly, I am here. I signed it, Nora. Then I put my phone down and opened the cedar box. The false bottom took me 6 weeks to find. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. I found it because Ellie, being Ellie, had designed it to be found eventually. There was a tiny notch on the left interior wall, just big enough to catch a thumbnail. I only found it because I was looking at the box in a certain light and saw that the grain of the wood didn't match on the bottom panel. I lifted the panel. Inside was a folded piece of cream-colored stationery. 3 folds. Her handwriting, blue ink, firm and slightly shaky in the way her writing had gotten in the last few years. The note said, Nora Jean, I have been watching you be told the wrong story about yourself your entire life. You were told you were difficult. You were told you were too much. You were told you wanted more than you deserved. None of that was true. You asked me a question once at a dinner table that nobody else was brave enough to ask, and your mother's face told you that you had done something wrong. You had not. You had done the most important thing. You told the truth in a room that ran on polite silence. I am leaving this house to you. I am leaving it only to you. The lawyer's name is Gerald Moe, and his number is 631-555-174. He has the documents. I love you without conditions, which is the only kind of love worth having. Gran. The house on Marsh Creek Road, Heron Falls, New York, valued by the county assessor at $387,000. Ellie passed away 7 weeks after her 83rd birthday. She had known. Of course she had known. The will was filed in November. Gerald Moe, who turned out to be a quiet man in a small office on Fenwick Street in Heron Falls, handled everything with minimal drama and maximum precision, which I appreciated. My mother's first response, delivered through a letter from a different attorney, was a contest of the will on the grounds of undue influence. The claim was that I had somehow manipulated an 83-year-old woman who had, for the record, written that note at least 13 months before her death, and had coordinated its delivery with the cedar box, with the mathematical patience of someone who had thought about this for a very long time. The contest was dismissed. The community recalibrated quietly. People who had heard my mother's version of me over years, the difficult daughter, the one who abandoned her family for ambition, the one who broke her parents' hearts, had to quietly revise. Ellie had been loved in that town. The specificity of her gesture said something. People read it. Some of them told my mother what they thought, in the gentle, coded way that small towns do those things. My Uncle Robert said nothing publicly but sent me a text that read, "Congratulations on the house." 4 words. I thought about what it cost him to type them. Aunt Connie came to see me in Heron Falls 3 weeks after the will was filed. We sat on the porch, the screened porch with a new cushion, and drank tea and talked for 2 hours. She cried. I did not. At least not then, not in front of her. She said, I should have said something at that dinner table, the 4th of July. I should have said something. I said, I know. That was all. It was enough. My father called. I answered, which surprised both of us. He said, I'm sorry I didn't, and then he stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He couldn't find the architecture for it. I said, I know, Dad. That was the first small late flicker. Too late to repair things. Not worthless either. I did not sell the house on Marsh Creek Road. I hired a property manager and spent 4 months overseeing a renovation. New roof, updated kitchen, fresh paint throughout, the crack in the dining room table finally repaired, though I kept the runner she had made and put it back exactly where it was. And I set up a fund. Through the Heron Falls Community Foundation, the Eleanor Voss Fund for Young Writers, $25,000 to start, seeded from my savings. Annual grants of $1,500 to 2 high school students from Heron Falls and the surrounding county who demonstrate what the application calls a willingness to ask honest questions in rooms that prefer silence. The first 2 recipients were announced last spring. I did not attend the ceremony. I sent a letter. Last Thanksgiving, I cooked dinner in my Ridgewood apartment. The kitchen is not big enough for the number of people I had over, 6 of us, including Simone and her partner, a friend from the Outerborough Review, and a woman I had met through a writing group who turned out to have grown up 40 minutes from Heron Falls and who had her own version of the story I've been telling you. The plates didn't match. I have 5 dinner plates, and 2 of them are from a set I bought at a thrift store on Myrtle Avenue for $3 each, and the others are mismatched things accumulated over years. The wine was a $12 bottle of something from the corner store. We ran out of chairs, and 2 people sat on the kitchen counter. Simone made a toast. She said something about chosen families and people who build their own tables, and she was a little bit wine-warm when she said it, and it was true. I thought of the table on Marsh Creek Road, the matched china, the serving dishes, the runner covering the crack, the 14 people who went silent when a 15-year-old asked an honest question. I didn't say any of that out loud. I didn't need to. I was already somewhere else. I was seen. If you're still listening, I want to say something directly to you. I want to name something you might recognize. It might be happening at a dinner table in your house, or it might have happened years ago in a room you left. The pattern looks like this. Someone who loves you, or says they do, has decided that the truest version of you is inconvenient, and so they have spent years, quietly, persistently, making you inconvenient to yourself, making you doubt the accuracy of your own perception, making the act of taking up space feel like an act of aggression. They call you difficult. They call you dramatic. They call you too sensitive. They call you ungrateful. They say with so much sweetness that they only want what's best for you as they build the walls of what's best a little tighter every year. Here's what those words are. They are the sound of someone losing control of a story they never had the right to tell. That is the truth at the center of this. You were not too much. You were precisely enough. The problem was never your size. The problem was that your size made their smallness visible. And they could not forgive you for that. My grandmother knew it at a dinner table in 2009. She spent 14 years building me a door that only I could open. Not every person who loves you quietly will have a cedar box and a lawyer on Fenwick Street, but some of them will find a way to tell you. Pay attention to the people who see you when the room has decided not to. Here's the question I want to leave you with. If a family member called you tomorrow, after years of silence, after you had built something real without them, what do you think they would say? Help me, or I'm sorry? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If you want more stories like this one, about the quiet ways people survive and the quieter ways they rebuild, there are more here on the channel. All of them are true in the ways that matter. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.